Good morning, Facebook family, and thanks for joining us this morning on Coffee Talk. My name is Melanie, and I help out the outreach team with different projects throughout the year, and I'm excited to be talking to you guys this morning. So this morning, we are going to be breaking down consent as it relates to intimate situations. So I know last week, the ladies talked to you a lot about what consent looks like outside of sex and intimate relationships, and how to talk to your young kiddos and even your teenagers about how consent applies in all areas of life and not just when it comes to sexual relationships or intimate situations. So today we're going to be breaking down the 4 criteria for what affirmative consent is and talking about how consent can be sexy and all of the benefits associated with actually taking the time to get the yes. So the first thing I want to talk about is the 4 criteria for what makes up consent. So first and foremost, it's important for us to understand that consent is clear and that consent is active. So consent can be expressed through words, actions, or gestures that create a mutual understanding that there is permission to move forward in a intimate relationship or in a sexual situation. Consent is never implied, and the absence of a no is not a yes. So I know that for me, I'm 40, and when I was learning in high school and college about consent and what consent was, it was kind of implied that as women, or as the person who was maybe less unsure of the situation, that it was our job to control the no of the situation. It was our job to make it very clear that we did not want to progress or move forward, and that if we did not say no, if we did not fight back, if we did not scream and yell, that consent was just kind of implied in that situation. And so we have kind of flipped that mentality on its head, and now we teach what is called affirmative consent. So affirmative consent is doing what, taking the time to get the yes from my partner. So understanding that silence is not consent. Understanding that when my partner says, I'm not sure, I don't know, maybe, or similar phrases like that, that those are all a hard no, that does not equal consent. So we are wanting to get an enthusiastic, affirmative yes from our partners before we move forward. The other piece of this part that I want to talk about is how it says it's expressed through words, actions, or gestures that create a mutual understanding that there is permission that takes place. I think this is great. I think, yes, that we can actually have gestures and, nonverbal cues showing that, yes, I want to move forward. But we also have to think about the fact that if I am just going off of someone's nonverbal cues, could that be something that I misinterpret, that I think is a yes when in actuality it is a no? Is it that I am looking past the nonverbal cues that they are giving me because I really want to move forward? I really like this person. I'm really turned on. And so could this then create a problem? I giggle a lot. I giggle when I'm nervous. I giggle when I'm uncomfortable. I giggle when I'm having a good time, when I'm laughing, when I think something's funny. So let's say I'm at a party and someone comes up to me and they lay out their best pickup line. And this is someone that I am not maybe interested in, and it catches me off guard, and I and I giggle. Could that be construed as something that I am into that I'm into that person, that I want them to continue talking to me and flirting with me, and having a conversation with me? It could. Could that mean that I am, yes, interested? It could. But does that giggle mean that I am interested and that I want to move forward? Not necessarily. It could mean a bunch of other things, right? Let's say that someone comes up and they lay their best pickup line on me and I blush, right? My face turns red and I kind of shy away. Could I be into it but playing hard to get? I could. Could I be absolutely not into it? I could, right? And so when we go off of just gestures and nonverbal cues, we have to be really, really careful because we could be misconstruing that, right? So again, affirmative consent. We want that yes, we want that enthusiasm. We want that person to be verbalizing, yes, I really like you. I like where this is going. I want to keep moving forward, right? So consent criteria number 1 is it is clear, it is active, right? Consent criteria number 2 is that consent is coherent. This means that people who are incapacitated by drugs or alcohol cannot, under the law, give consent, right? So someone cannot make rational, reasonable decisions. They don't understand the who, what, where, when, why of the situation if they are under the influence of drugs or alcohol, right? If they are incapacitated, if they are not understanding the situation that they are in, if they are asleep or in another vulnerable situation. Or another vulnerable position. So a lot of times when we're in the colleges, the students will say, well, how do I know if they're incapacitated, right? How do I know if my partner is incapacitated? My response to that is always, if you have to ask if they're incapacitated, they probably are, right? If we have to ask ourselves, are they incapacitated? Are they too drunk? Are they too high? Are they too under the influence? To be able to make this decision, I need to understand that me asking myself that is me trying to justify being able to move forward when my partner is probably in a position where they would not normally consent to that situation, okay? So number three is that for consent is that it is willing. Consent is never given under pressure. This means that consent cannot be obtained through psychological or emotional manipulation. It cannot be obtained through physical violence or the threat of physical violence. And someone in an imbalance of power situation cannot, under the law, give consent. This is really important because if we think of what an imbalance of power situation means, think about that for a minute. What would that look like, right? That imbalance of power. We hear of situations all the time where there are teachers in relationships with students, where there are doctors who have taken advantage of patients, where there are bosses in relationships with people that work for them, right? There are supervisors who are taking advantage of that power. Now, does that mean that if you are over the age of 18, consent is just implied, right? Because consent in the state of Texas age of consent in the state of Texas is 17. So does that mean that if I'm 17 and over, I can just consent to that type of situation? Not necessarily, right? I may not be thinking of what the afterthought or the after situation of that may be. So if I'm in college and my TA, my teaching assistant, or my professor tries to engage in an inappropriate relationship with me, I may be all about that. I'm thinking of all the benefits that can happen. I may get better grades, I may get special preferences, but I'm not necessarily thinking about what may happen when I decide I don't want to be in that relationship anymore. That imbalance of power, how could that then impact my life, right? And so let's say that I enter into a relationship with my teacher and then decide that I don't want to be with them anymore. What are some things that could happen? How could that imbalance of power affect my life? Number one, maybe I get worse grades. Maybe I am forced to go to office hours with this person in a secluded area, right, where no one else is there. Maybe I get picked on a lot in class and am made to look stupid in front of everybody. Maybe they fail me. Maybe I'm graded harder, right? All of these things that this imbalance of power can affect my life when I decide I don't want to be with them anymore. Let's see. So number 4, consent is ongoing. So this means that consent must be granted every single time. Now, consent must be granted not just every single time, but every step along the way of physical intimacy. So this means that if someone consented to sexual activity yesterday or last week or every day this week, that it is not implied that I will then consent again today, right? It must be granted every single time. And also each step along the way. So we think about, we go out to a party, we meet somebody, and the evening is progressing. What would that consent look like, right? A lot of times people think consent is really dorky, that consent is uncomfortable, that consent is awkward. And it doesn't have to be. right? There are a lot of different ways that we can ask for consent without saying, do you consent to me holding your hand? Do you consent to me kissing you on the lips? That might be a little strange, right? That might be a little awkward. But it can be as simple as asking someone, is this okay? Do you want to do this? Have you been drinking? Have you been drinking too much? Are you comfortable with moving forward? Would you like me to blank, right? Are you sure you want to do this? Tell me what you want, right? Asking them for that feedback. Some other things to think about are how we ask the questions, right? So let's say that things are progressing through the evening and I'm reading a little bit of body language from my partner that may be a little bit hesitant, right? If I say, do you want to keep going? Is that a good check-in question? Do you want to keep going? I think so. I mean, I think asking the question is really great anyway, right? But also thinking about how we ask the question. If we're in the midst of things and I say, do you want to keep going? It trails off. Am I implying that I want a particular answer? I could be, right? Am I inviting space in that situation for my partner to say, I don't really know. I may want to take a break. Now, is there a different way I can ask that question that leaves that air in the room for that person to say, no, I think I want to stop? So maybe instead of saying, do you want to keep going? I say, do you want to stop? You want to take a break? How are you feeling about things, right? Sometimes the way that we ask the question can then evoke an even, more open space for that person to feel more comfortable saying, I don't really know. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. Maybe I do want to take a break. Could we get a glass of water? Could we go for a little walk? And then maybe, start back up after that. A lot of times in the college classrooms when talking about this also, it's important to talk about the benefits of asking for consent, right? What are the good things that can come out of maybe those awkward moments that we have, right? So some of the things that I hear from students are that, maybe that hookup, maybe that one night thing ends up turning into a really great relationship because I took the time to respect that person, right? Number 2 would be that everyone feels respected, that everyone feels like it's a part of, like they are a part of that process, that it's not just one-sided, someone trying to get what they want out of that relationship. Maybe that person is willing to go a little bit further than they would normally go because they feel respected in that relationship, because they feel like that person is taking an interest in them. So thinking of all the benefits, the biggest benefit I think is the cops aren't going to be knocking at your door the next day saying that you did something inappropriate or that you took advantage from someone. So taking the extra time to get the yes. Also internally knowing that you did the right thing, that when that person was hesitant, when they said, I don't know, maybe that you took that as a no and that they understood that they were being respected in that, and that that you did the right thing. So, a lot of information in a short amount of time, but I hope you guys enjoyed it and understand a little bit more about what consent is and what it looks like. So, quick review. 4 criteria for consent. Number 1, consent is clear, it is active, right? Number 2, consent is coherent. Number 3, consent is willing. And number 4, consent is ongoing. Join us tomorrow for another Coffee Talk. Have a great day, you guys.